Yes. James Allen is here, Don is here, Zach is here, Brock is here, Matt is here, Vicky is here, and I'm here. Okay, so the attendance is okay. I want to just check that next month we have a meeting and there's no problem, and the meeting is scheduled for September 10th. Everyone's got that okay?
At 7 p.m.
At 7 o'clock.
7 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Okay, everyone's all set with that?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
September 10th.
The agenda is the town park. I mean, only because you would be able to give us maybe something better than what we got, when I say what we got. Amy sent me an email, which I did not bother to send out to everybody. Or did I send it out to everybody? I don't remember.
I don't know.
I haven't received one recently.
All right, yeah, right, I got that one.
Okay.
It's about answering the questions from, that she brought in to your town board meeting. She brought them to the environmental meeting, sent them out to everybody.
I think she wanted our engineer to answer.
Right, and the lady, what's her name?
Galante?
Galante.
Yes.
To answer.
Mhm.
And she agreed to.
She said yes, she would.
That we asked. And she was, I don't want to say pressing me, but she pressed the same thing you got the same memo.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, to answer them kind of verbatim, one by one, I would imagine, right?
Right.
I have not seen a response to those questions yet.
okay. Okay.
Have you?
No,
Okay.
no. And the question we have is, before we could do a negative deck on the park, which we said if all the questions were answered properly, we will not have a problem.
Makes a lot of
all right?
sense.
If they're answered, again, properly. How long, what is the waiting period on this? I thought this was the way it was being pushed on us to get it okay.
Right, there was a similar push to get the questions answered right away, absolutely.
Right.
So what I'll do is I'll make sure that I bring that back to everybody, and actually I'll call Bob Lannon, I can actually call him this evening.
But I meant,
In
is
the
there
voicemail.
an urgency from the town board's perspective that they wanted to pass this and get working on the park? I mean, I just took it for granted that was the reasoning this was.
And I did sense the same sense of urgency in the sense that, you know, it was on the agenda over and over again, and we had these objections. But as I think we were in the last meeting that we were here, we were saying that we wanted to get these questions answered, you know, have an independent evaluation, et cetera. I think these questions are fair. I think they just need to be answered, and once we get the answers on the table, then you'll be able to provide whatever.
One thing
recommendation
that I thought was happening at the last, when the supervisor came here and the lady, which I can't seem to want to remember her name.
From Pier.
Right.
Galante?
Right.
I can't remember her first name, but.
I thought that some of the questions we were very interested in, we were very interested in all the questions, but a couple of them, you know, triggered responses that I think we would love the answers, because it would throw out some of the negative comments that could be
Concerns.
made to us. But I think very fairly, all we were asking for was the results, correct? Anybody, Mr.?
I can't understand why it would take her so long to respond. I'm sure she knows the answers to those questions, no problem. I would think. Why does it take so long to respond?
Brock?
Well, in one of the questions she asked something about the DEC in 1980-ish issued a permit for the town to bury what they dug out of the intakes. And I don't think any of us have seen that. And I didn't recognize that wasn't part of what.
That's part of, it was part of Amy's question.
I believe it was. It's very difficult for me to read the report because I can only do it on my phone.
I understand.
And so I went through and I can't highlight or anything,
Yeah.
so, But I remember seeing that in 1980, we had, the DEC permitted this, and there should be some paperwork regarding the permitting. Who actually did the work, what did they do? There should have been a final report to the town. And going back to GHD's report, I didn't see any of that mentioned.
I don't believe it was.
Yeah, so that would be something to, you know, I don't know if those reports are still available. They should be. I mean, they shouldn't be discarded. They should
I
be
would
somewhere.
agree with you. I think the problem that you have is that with any institutional knowledge base, things get lost. I mean,
Right.
you would think that the DEC, the permitting, that application should be, you should be able to pull that up on the computer,
Right.
right? With all of the corresponding
I couldn't,
documents
yeah.
and the, but I think if Amy is asking the question, that means that she couldn't find it either.
Yeah.
I'm reading between the lines, and that's why she's asking the question.
Yeah.
But
But
I'm,
we do have the 1978 Krybel report, and
right.
we have things that, like wastewater now is using that line, so they, at some point, they came online and began using it, so.
So I noticed that I have Bob Lannon's cell phone right here. I'd be happy to just go in the other room and make a quick phone call or try to ask him about a timeline if that
All
helps.
right, there were two other things that came up. One, at your town board meeting, you were doing some kind of grant application for the park, and then it was too late, so that was discontinued.
There was a seeker issue, is what I understood. That resolution was put on the agenda, and this was raised by the town attorney. The town attorney had looked at it and said that the seeker needed to be done first for the one resolution, and that's why that one was pulled off the agenda. The second one was based on the grant language itself. I got a subsequent email from the grant writer who was kind of upset that we had possibly missed some of this money based on changing one word for another, and that the grant language is typically pretty standardized, and that change might have cost us the ability to get the grant. I'm hoping that that's not the case, but I know that wasn't a seeker issue, it wasn't an environmental issue, it was more of
I
a,
think I asked Bill about the grant, and he said, we'll just go after it next year.
possibly that it's a renewing grant.
Yeah.
You know, whether we could have gotten it 2 years in a row, I don't know the nature of it.
And the second question, which is always thrown under the curtain, not by the town board, but just in discussions,
Yeah.
is the building.
Building is down there.
The building is down there that Recreation and Parks have used, which is not very clean from the water side when you look at it from the.
Is that the one from the 40s that was a pump station?
Yes.
Okay.
And only because I've been out on the river in a sailboat, and once in a
You've seen
while they come down, yeah, you can see that, what is going on with that?
I haven't heard any potential plans. Whether it's going to be raised or not, I don't know. I would imagine, I know that there have been some private, and again, this is unofficially, I know that there in the past have been some unofficial uses for that building from private individuals that expressed some interest. So I'm assuming from that the bones of the building are good.
Mhm.
Questions I would have, obviously, would be asbestos and
Yeah.
other remedial things that might still be in the building. Again, if the town owns it now, it's our problem, so again, it would just be another environmental remediation that we'd have to worry about.
I guess the major part of that is to find a place where Recreation and Parks can move their
I agree.
materials, correct?
Exactly.
So you can't close them out of there without having a place to put them someplace else.
Very good.
And whether or not that could be used for the park or not, tied to the park.
Mhm.
Yeah.
My understanding that it's a 3-story basement,
Mhm.
and down at the bottom is where so it's about 30 feet down, that's where the water department, wastewater department needs to access that stuff. So if you raise the building, what would you end up with, a trap door and ladders or something, or?
Hard to say. I don't know.
Do you mean there's infrastructure down there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not just storage.
No, it was a big,
Because you're
just
pumping-
a big pump station.
You're pumping currently
Oh, I did not know that.
wastewater from the treatment plant through that pipe into the river.
Although I'm not sure if that's gravity fed or not,
Yeah,
that
I
way.
think
I
that's-
think, if I'm not
Well,
mistaken.
I'm sorry, I used
Yeah.
the word pump, I should
Yeah,
have
yeah,
done
yeah.
that, correct.
I think when it used to, again, my very generic understanding of it is that there used to be mechanics down there that used to pump water from the river up to the TNT factory
Right.
at the low site. That now it's
Go
the
the
water
opposite
goes the
way.
opposite
And
direction.
it's gravity fed, you're
Yeah.
100% right, there's no pumps, but all the,
But there should be pumps down there.
All the old
Right.
equipment's
It
now.
should be,
Yeah.
yeah.
sure.
Whether that could be, filled in with concrete or covered over, I couldn't tell you.
Well, I'm on the historical commission as well, and it's an old building, uniquely built, well-built.
And so I heard the
And
bones were good.
Yeah, so it would be kinda sad if we lost everything, but if
Sure.
it's,
Nice to repurpose.
if it's repurposed, it would be a much better outcome for it, but not if it's gonna be mucho bucks.
Well, from the outside, it looks like, I'm not talking about watching what's going on there, but from the outside of the building, it looks like a very nice building, it's not out of place where it is.
Where it is,
I think the proposed use had something to do with a distillery or
Oh, okay.
because it's high, it's a tall building,
Mm-hmm,
from what I understand. I've never been in it.
yeah.
Interesting, interesting. All right, other questions?
Field trip.
Any other questions about the town park? I mean, it certainly is an issue that's constantly before us. The concern here is to make it safe for families to be able to use without
Mhm.
having any negative effects.
Had the commission issued a letter yet to the town board, or are you waiting for the answers to those questions first? Very good, very good. And that makes a lot of sense to me.
And I think we were very clear, the supervisor was here, were you here for that meeting?
I was not.
The supervisor who was here, I don't
Mr.
think
Guyver was
Guyver-
here, no?
I don't know if he was here or
No,
not,
he
but the
wasn't.
other two,
No.
the other two councilmen were here.
Rob
Yes.
and
It was
Kobe.
pretty, it was pretty clear what we said at that meeting.
Okay.
That with the proper results, assuming that all the Ts are crossed,
Mhm.
and that the satisfaction with the engineer and his reporting, that we didn't see, as long as it was to that one point we keep making, was safe for families and their health was our concern.
I understand. Well, I'll talk to Jerry.
A further question is the actual use of the park. We know that there's a plan to put a kayak launch and a fishing pier. What other uses would you be thinking it would be a picnic area or a
I've only-
playground?
You know, it's funny, I mean, we've seen drawings of it.
Right.
And that's the contemplated thing. I think getting it approved will be the first phase, and
Yeah.
then filling out the details would be the second
Second,
phase.
yeah.
I really don't think that anyone has kind of made an exclusive list of what it is or isn't going to be.
You know, that poses an interesting question, because if we're doing a negative deck on the park, normally, we don't get applications for partial ideas or partial
Right.
Yeah.
projects. We get a request for a finish to determine the health and nature of the environmental of it.
And I think the difference here was there's gonna be significant design expenses,
Right,
correct?
right.
So we were asked, were we not asked to do it at a much earlier stage?
I think also that the variables tend to be out on the water versus with construction of the land, so moving land.
I don't believe that a beach is thought.
I never saw anything about a
Yeah, I
beach.
don't think that would even be appropriate there. I don't think the way that the water is and the narrow
I
width
think
of
just the permitting through.
Yeah.
So maybe, with that regard, what Brock has brought up, you should take back to the town board that a negative deck should be on the whole park.
Fair enough.
What the plan is, the project, and we had concerns, if you remember, the engineer mentioned that in a couple of places, they would put cement over the pads over the area that they thought was,
The lagoons,
right.
that have been-
And so, again, we certainly
Design
approve,
feature.
yeah, we approve that, but I think we should see, I'm not looking for a roadway that takes up a lot of the land, for example, or for a big parking lot, you know, with asphalt down there. In other words, we need to look at,
More concise idea.
yes,
For sure.
once, and I don't know if that's,
You know what I could do is, I don't think that that's something that's out of the question. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think getting those questions answered first, and then maybe having the answers and that kind of plan presented at the same time, then you can make your determination based on that.
well, in
I
other
mean,
words.
there's only, I mean, nobody's gonna put volleyball courts or baseball diamond, you know? I mean, those kind of recreational activities down there aren't being considered, so there's only a handful of things that could be.
And I think someone brought up, even when we were talking outside before we were meeting for the meeting, whether or not the Corps of Engineers, who controlled the river at that point, had been brought into as far as doing a fishing pier and doing a
Kayak launch.
kayak launch. In other words, should they be involved, and the engineer might be able to answer that before you get too far down the road.
Okay.
I think someone brought that up, am I correct?
Then,
Yes, Jim?
And maybe they don't need to be, but maybe someone like river keepers could be.
They're always a valuable resource.
Right, yeah.
I think the vision for the park is important for us to know, because I think if you were to put in like playground equipment that required anchoring below surface, now you're disturbing even some fencing might disturb.
Has anyone seen that? I have not seen
No,
playground
but-
equipment.
Like you say, without a complete vision for the park, how do you know what's,
Yeah, what's coming, yeah.
What's coming?
Yeah,
The
right.
only thing we saw was a very
Basic plan.
basic sketch,
Mhm.
if I remember correctly, that Bill Guyman showed us. I
And
don't
I think it
remember.
had access to the water.
Wasn't there something in the
I think it was a
GHD
gazebo.
part, their report that had some picturing of, mapping and that of what the conceptually thought would be, you know, the roadway and gazebo and picnic
Two
tables.
pavilions.
Yeah, pavilion.
that
That's right.
cost more than a house. And then, a kayak launch and a road and everything, with a lookout off the,
a handicap
Existing
parking
building.
drop off?
handicap parking was the only parking below. Kayak 15-minute drop off was on the map.
Main parking
Two
up by the road,
pavilions.
up above.
Well,
Little
that
ridge
was in
there.
the senior center parking lot.
Thought there was some on the west side of the road too for people to park the car.
I don't think so.
I only saw
I
one
I
little
kinda
area.
thought there was parking there, 'cause
On the flat part.
expecting people to drop their kayaks off, park in the senior center and then walk back, you're talking a 15-minute walk. And, you know, if you're a single person, all your equipment is exposed for that period of time.
So you're talking about there might have been a drop off up on top?
I thought there was a plan for parking up near that
The
old
flat
building.
spot near the road.
There might have been, yeah.
Could have been wrong, but
There's not a lot of room up there.
no. No, there's a lot of equipment from the town, vehicles parked in that. At least looking at the,
Junk.
junk, but the Google map, you could see there's debris there, maybe abandoned vehicles or abandoned
Oh,
equipment.
you're not talking about River Road parking, you're talking about,
I'm
Below
talking
the
right
regular
around
building.
that 1940s pump station
oh,
building.
all right, all right. I've not even, didn't even see that.
But I'll get that for you.
All right, so I mean, in other words, I think these are just other questions
Fair enough.
that come up, and that really puts us in a little bit of a jam if we're approving one thing.
Yeah. You would need both before you could approve anything, or make any sort of determination.
So
That's fair.
one, the environmental request would be about the land itself. That the engineer has presented his reports, the town board has evaluated them, and now it's sent to us. And we've asked the great questions to be answered. If they've been answered, then we could determine about the next step. So I'm just wondering if we do not give an environmental negative deck till the next step is brought to us as to what the park's gonna be.
It makes sense to me.
Am I saying that the correct way?
Yeah. I think
And
so.
I completely understand, so I'll carry that water and make sure that you get that conceptual plan.
Do you want that in the form of a motion that we're withholding a thing, so it's in writing then? Or withholding a decision until,
I thought we're waiting on answers.
or, yeah, till we get the answers to the questions?
Well, so last, in June, it's just a no action, you take no action,
Okay,
so.
that's good enough, that's good enough.
Right, no action taken by the Environmental Commission, other than to request a special meeting with GHD for more information, which,
We held in July,
yeah, James,
correct?
yep. You made the motion to not recommend the project at this time, pending those questions being answered.
So that's still on the table.
So there you go.
Nothing's changed.
Did we send that to the town board?
I don't recall seeing that.
A letter? Well, actually, we requested a special meeting, that's when Steve came back and said, come to the town board meeting,
I would recommend.
July 8th.
No, he didn't tell us to come to the town board meeting.
I think initially you did,
I think
then he
initially he
amended
did,
that.
Initially he did, okay, then
and
he
and
amended
then
that.
he.
They came to ours, didn't
Then they came to ours,
Yeah.
yeah, we had a special meeting on the
So
8th.
I think what I would suggest
Okay.
is that that motion now triggers into a letter from us
Okay.
saying we held a special meeting that the town engineer and the lady who Galante,
Yep, you got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
if you could correctly go back to the minutes.
I
because-
wasn't there,
Oh,
I was in Rhode Island.
well,
Sent you
it'd
the
be
minutes.
nice if
Oh.
we had your correct name.
Okay.
And,
I'll review.
all right, anyway, we send a letter to the town board saying that we held the special meeting with the town engineer and Miss Galante, whatever her name is, and discussed the town park. And the follow-up would be what Jim suggested, we took no action on the town park based on the questions that were asked of the
Galante.
engineer in Galante,
Kathy Galante.
Kathy
Found it in my
Galante,
notes,
thank
so.
you.
Perfect, did you get the right spelling?
No.
And we're waiting for those questions to be answered, correct? So that we took no action.
Would you mind adding the fact that you'd like just so that your negative declaration, if that's what it ends up being, or your consideration has the full scope of what
Okay.
the plan is also?
For
So-
us to give a negative deck on the project for the town park, we would need the full project's outlines so as to understand what's going to be there in the final drawings and final report. Is that
I agree.
satisfactory?
I do. I agree.
All right, I think we would need a motion for that letter.
So all this gets back to this Kathy Galante.
Pretty much. Other than the outline of the
Right,
project.
we don't have to direct anything to her.
Just to GHD and they'll direct it wherever they want to do it.
Well, that, in
We directed it
actuality,
to her directly.
I would,
I think she already has the directive.
yeah, I
Answer.
would believe the town board is waiting for those
We are.
answers, and so, we would get them as that they were given to the town board.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think we have to go out of our way to go to the engineer and ask him for it.
I'll be making that request in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
But am I right?
Yeah, I agree.
So it's a motion for that, do you
So
have
moved.
something written?
I got some.
I second.
I'll make a note of that.
A second, any discussion?
Jim did.
Jim motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay, carried. That's basically our agenda. I see that Amy has come in. Amy, do you have anything you want to add to our meeting?
Just one question, you might add in the vision category, and that is the Greenway application, which is probably that map that you may have seen early on in the process, includes a budget for 300 linear feet of docks, which is massive, like the size of the Buffalo Harbor kayak launch. So this proposal to add a 5th or 6th kayak launch between the village and Porter on the Lake seems to be quite massive, and considerably larger than the drawing that was on that Greenway application map. So if JHD could clarify, maybe it was 300 narrow feet and they're going to double it up, or what, but is this really a kayak launch? The other suggestion for down the road, if you ever get answers to the questions, which after it's been a full month, so I'm not sure whether or not you will get answers to the questions, but if you do, I would strongly, again, encourage you, as I have the town board, to send the questions and the answers along to the Department of Health Environmental Investigative Area, and ask the Department of Health, based solely on composite sampling, could there be more exceedances than were detected in the composites as taken? And if DOH were the client, if they were the lead agency, like the town is in this situation, would they have asked for more discrete samplings? Would they consider any risk of continued leaching from the burial unless the burial were excavated, which they may not know the answer to, depending on how they feel about the sampling. And last but not least, which goes back to a comment made by this committee at the first meeting, is given that the Niagara River is a Class A waterway that is impaired for mercury among other things, and that the mapping of the data shows that the mercury was highest in the lower part, the deeper part of the burial, and then second highest between the burial and the river, in other words 4 or 5 times higher than the rest of the site. If there is leaching towards the river, does that require that the ecological resources cleanup objectives be used? And I'd be happy to email this to Zach if interested, but the only other thing I have to add is thank you all very much for the amount of time you put in for the civic good. It's very much appreciated. I'm talking to the commission now.
I think we brought up, either before you were here or maybe you heard it, we brought up that we would think the Corps of Engineers would get involved with the river part, whether it's the docks, the fishing pier, or the kayak launch, whatever. That happens to be, according to fishermen, a pretty good idea, pretty good area for spawning. That fish come in that area, so there's some.
Would that mean that we wouldn't then have a fishing thing because we want to protect the spawning area, or?
They would be the ones to
They would
advise
decide
you as to
that.
what and how.
And DEC might also, technically maybe be concerned about that.
Almost like what you're talking about with the water rising.
Yeah, I mean, look at the docks right now, the sand docks. It's a disaster, so
They
I'm
have those
just
floating ones now. I'm not sure what this would be. Again, design is something.
It seems like the people whose docks survive year after year after year
What is it called?
are taking them in and out.
Sure.
Yeah.
They're floating,
Yeah.
floating docks, yeah.
I would assume that this would be something along those lines.
Right.
I think that the Army Corps wouldn't allow solid structure in the middle of the water because of those spawning areas and disruption of that.
Al, this is beyond the scope of the Environmental Commission, but I'm curious, has the town board given any estimate of what the annual maintenance cost for
No.
this would be?
No. No, it hasn't gotten far enough to do those calculations. As we were talking earlier, I mean, the prospective project is still a concept, it's not necessarily a finite thing, so if we're talking about having docks and pulling them in and out, I mean, there's gonna be a different cost than if there isn't. I would imagine the kayak launches are primarily flexible and they're seasonal, they come in and out. I think they're just too fragile to leave in with the ice and snow. Again, I have not seen any of that. But certainly, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? So,
Well, I would imagine if the town board were ever to hold a public meeting, that might be one of the questions.
sure.
Uh,
No, I agree. I think ultimately, the threshold question is whether it should be built, and I think that's what you guys are tackling now.
Al, could I ask you a question? When you present a proposal to the Greenway, to me, it seems a little confusing, because it seems like it's a very complicated process. Do you have to have all your environmental issues squared away?
I don't believe so.
Oh, you can
Not-
apply?
No, I think you get approved for a project, is my understanding, and then you have to go through the gamut of
They
your
will
own.
promise to fund something that's not,
Subject to approval.
yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly, it's subject to all the standard scrutiny.
Okay.
So if it's a building, it meets building code. If it's a statute, it meets safety codes or whatever, you know, if it's a park. And there's environmental concerns gotta be with those.
Okay, anything else for the good of the group?
Whatever happened to the surprise solar farm presentation we had last month?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to that?
Has it come before the town board?
It is not.
So we're waiting on,
Still a surprise.
Yeah, it was a surprise.
seeker 1, 2, and 3, part 1, 2, and 3.
And we've never seen the full seeker.
I haven't either.
Maybe when you check with the engineer, you can ask him.
I will do that too. You want me
Okay.
to call you? I'll call you after the meeting.
Fine.
Okay.
Okay, anything, a very good question, Mrs. Polka, Vicky, thank you. Anybody else?
Hey, Jerry, you sent us an email about the thorium. Was it thorium, was that the chemical, or the
From the website?
isotope? Could you give us